Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and last month my patrons voted and picked 3 abstract concepts, ideas, feelings for me to use as the inspiration to create 3 colorways on yarn. Today we are going to dye yarn inspired by nostalgia, optimism, and anticipation. And I am really excited to go play around with some colors and evoke some feelings as I'm dyeing yarn. Now, I will be talking about what these colors mean to me and why I picked them. They might not be the obvious or expected choice, but I look forward to hearing what colors and techniques you would pick inspired by these concepts. Dyepot PS stands both for Postscript and Patreon Special, and it is a complimentary series to the Dyepot Weekly series, but ChemKnits patrons get early access to these videos. So if you would like to see what is coming up next in Dyepot PS, you should go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. There will be a link in the video description and in the iCard, which is in the top right-hand corner of your screen. In this 5-gallon bucket, I am pre-soaking 9 skeins, or 900 grams, of Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and is one of my favorite blends to dye, and I dye this base all the time. I'm pre-soaking it in just some plain tap water for at least 30 minutes. For anticipation, I want to do a space dyeing technique, an immersion technique, but I'm going to add different colors of dye into different parts of the pot. And the anticipation is from not knowing exactly how much white will be left, how the colors mix, how it'll turn out in the end, because there's an element of mystery since we have a lot of water and we can't see what's happening under the surface. And I'm not gonna stir. We'll see if I keep to that, but that is the plan. In my dedicated dye pot that I never use for food, I have about 24 cups of water, and I'm gonna add just 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. And now I'm coming in with 3 skeins of our yarn, and I am ever so slightly twisting them. And the reason why I'm slightly twisting it is that I want there to be able to be some of each skein at the surface and some of each in the middle and below. So I gently twisted them, had the bottom here, and then the other end is here towards the center. You can see that the yarn can fluff up a lot. There's a lot of space for movement here, and I'm going to start heating this up until we see movement at the surface. And now we're going to get ready to add a little dash of nostalgia to our anticipation colorway. Our dash of nostalgia is a bit both from the technique and the colors. Today I am playing with 100 milliliters of each of the 3 Dharma acid dye colors: Silver Gray, Intense Iris, and True Black. And these were all mixed as 1% stock solutions, which means there was 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid. I'm using 100 milliliters of each of the 3 colors, but I am dissolving them a little bit differently. The True Black, I'm just dissolving in 100 milliliters of water, but then the Intense Iris and the Silver Gray, I'm dissolving each in that 100 mils of dye into about 300 milliliters of liquid, so that way the colors can spread a bit more once we add them to our pot. I did rinse out my graduated cylinder in between each color. I was a tiny bit shy with my Intense Iris, so I added, I rinsed out the stock solution bottle with a little bit of water, but I wanted to give you a sense of what our colors all look like mixed. So here is our black, which is very black. The gray is a lot more pastel, but then we've got some nice intensity in that Intense Iris. So even though they all look very dark, the colors are absolutely distinct. Okay, we're getting nice and hot. Let's start with our black. Let's see, where do I want to go? I sort of want to go down the middle and to the sides a little bit. Okay, Okay, that's our black. Remember, we don't know what's happening beneath the surface. So back when I first did this colorway, I used very, very similar colors from Jacquard. I used Jacquard Violet, Jet Black, and Silver Gray. So here is some gray. I'm now a little torn. Maybe we're only going to use half the gray. I'm pouring a lot by the edge because I want some of the dye to go beneath. And actually you can see some spread over there. So again, I don't know what this colorway is going to do, but the Intense Iris is a lot like the Jacquard Violet that I used. I really want to poke it. Okay, I am going to poke that down, but I'm not otherwise shimmying it. I'm trying to stay truthful. Okay, because we're going to see a lot of color on top, but we, again, aren't going to know exactly what's happening below. This cup is really full. Okay, I decided to bring more of the Intense Iris in. So it's very, very dark right now, and actually on camera you're looking a little blown out. There we go. But we've got the gray, the black, and our iris. And even though I still have another container of gray, I'm gonna leave it here. Odds are we have a lot of white, but I think that it's gonna be pretty wonderful. One other thing I do want to do right now is I am going to go ahead and add a little more vinegar, but it's not being mixed, but just adding some more acid because I don't want things to mix up too much, but I'm excited and I am dying to know what's going on underneath, but that's where our anticipation comes in. Without moving the yarn, how much coverage will we have? Did it strike so fast that we're going to see a ton of white? Is the yarn going to feel balanced? Am I going to want to over dye it? Eek! I want to know! Anticipation! Alright everyone, I'm going to wait I think 20 minutes and then we'll come check in. The simmer got a little vigorous, so I reduced the heat to low and everything sunk down. Ah! I want to know what's happening! Okay, at least I've got a spoon. So we can see there's not much color left. The black can sometimes stain around the edges, so we do see it looks very, very dark, but a lot of that is also just the yarn itself. But let's go ahead and add 1, 2-ish more tablespoons of white vinegar. I'm gonna leave it on heat for another 20 minutes and I'm gonna avoid touching it. It's really hard. The pot is very steamy. Doesn't really look like much has changed. I would say that there's even less color. Maybe there's still a hint of purple in there. I am resisting every urge to move things around, but I'm going to go ahead and let the yarn cool off here in the pot. Now let's talk about our color Optimistic. For this, I immediately thought of a bright, pure highlighter yellow. The color that evokes brand new school supplies, opening a fresh marker, seeing your highlighter that does not yet have any ink on the tip. You've got a world of possibilities open. And so therefore I had to pick Dharma Fluorescent Lemon. This color is bright and gives me all of those highlighter feels. I suppose I could have actually dyed the yarn with highlighter, but the yellow actually doesn't really work well with acid. That color sort of disappears under acidic conditions. So that's a little fun fact. But I took 1 gram of the fluorescent lemon color and dissolved it in an unspecified volume of water. And I'm going to use this 1 gram of dye to dye 300 grams of yarn. So the depth of shade is less than 1, but I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that this will give me the yellow that I want. But if I've undershot it, we can always add more dye. That is always an option. So let's go take a closer look. In my first ever dedicated dye pot, I have about 20 cups of cool tap water no vinegar. And I'm coming in with our highlighter yellow dye, which actually had dissolved pretty well. Just a tiny bit left. This is a bright yellow. I'm actually going for something a little bit similar to a highlighter yellow yarn that I over dyed at one point. I hope this isn't going to be too much dye, but I think it should be pretty good. I don't mind if we end up with some variation of color in here. Basically, I just want it to be a tonal or semi-solid highlighter yellow yarn for our optimistic theme. Now everything is still cool. Oh, that color is great. Coming in with 300 grams of yarn. The color, I can't tell if it's going to be as neon as I wanted or if it's just going to be a gorgeous, gorgeous yellow. But either way, oh no, this is going to be, especially as it dries, it's going to be bright, beautiful, and awesome. I'm not going to worry about moving it around a ton more. I guess I want to move it once I add acid, but I am taking care around the ties just to wiggle so we can make sure we get some color in there. Now I am going to turn on the heat and we are going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. And unlike Anticipation, this one we will stir it around a bit to sort of distribute that acid. I have no idea how quickly or slowly the colors will strike, but I don't know. This yellow is making me really happy. In addition to the highlighter, when thinking about being optimism and being optimistic, I thought about that moment when you're outside, you're taking a moment, you close your eyes and you turn your face up to the sun, and that moment of just warmth and calm as you feel that sunlight through your lids. This isn't the color, but like this yellow color isn't the color I see when that happens, but it's just, I wanted a very happy yellow to feel that. This is definitely a highlighter yellow. I wonder if it's a little too much dye to be super, super neon, but nevertheless, I'm really happy. I don't play with yellow a lot, so I'm really excited. 20 minutes are up and woohoo, she's bright. Checking in, I think most of the color is actually in the yarn. For me to move it aside, but I think most of the color is in the yarn. I am gonna leave the yarn in the pot to cool completely before we wash it. Sometimes fluorescent colors need just a little bit more time. I want to take this opportunity to thank the ChemKnits Fiber patrons. I would like to thank Jessica Parco, Karen Siegel, Claire, and the rest of the Fiber patrons. You'll see some of their names crossing the screen right now. As I mentioned earlier in this video, ChemKnits patrons get early access to the newest Dyepot PS episode. Depending on the level, there are other really fun perks like exclusive behind-the-scenes sneak peeks as I'm filming new videos, advance notice of shop restocks, and even permanent coupons to my Etsy shop. You can find more about the Patreon down at the link in the video description. So patrons, thank you all so, so much. And now, let's think back. Now it's time to figure out what I'm gonna do for Nastalgia. And honestly, I still don't know. I went into this with a plan for Anticipation. I really want to touch that yarn, and for Optimistic, but Nostalgia. And what's interesting is that there are elements of nostalgia already wrapped up into this video with our throwback colorway for Anticipation and oh, I want to touch that yarn, to remembering dyeing yarn with highlighters and the excitement and curiosity that went into that project and starting school and all those feelings in Optimistic. So I don't know what to do. I just spent about 15 minutes going through my old baby photos, and the things that really jumped out to me, not just that my hair was a much brighter red when I was little, is that I wore a lot of pastels. And so that sort of nostalgic antique color feeling of pinks and mints and yellows is very, very present on my baby and early childhood photos from the 80s. And I think that that's where we're gonna go today. But I want to do a little bit of a more modern twist and play with some speckles. I have some pre-mixed pastel colors that I haven't played with yet. Some that I have, but some that I haven't, and I think we might give that a shot and see what we can come up with. Now, with acid dyes, you aren't going to get pastel speckles, but by using the dry powder and helping it spread, I should be able to get a pastel colorway even if you don't see those speckles. I'm going to go for the speckling technique, I think. We'll see if it works. It might end up being too pigmented, but we're going to try. Here in my catering steam pan across 2 burners, I have about 16 cups of water. I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. And then I'm going to bring over our last 3 pre-soaks. I haven't decided if I'm going to go all over or if we're going to go for more. Maybe we'll go for something a little more like variegated, where we'll have like our more mint section, then yellow, then pink at the other end. That might be fairly nostalgic, but there will be some blending and some haze. It's not going to be sharp, crisp lines. So I think that this should be nice. Now, we've got lots of water. It's not low immersion. So although I'm going to be speckling, the colors will be spreading out, which I think will be very fun. Let's talk colors. I think I want to go with ballerina pink. Duckling, I don't know how intense it'll be, but maybe we'll shift to ivory if it feels too intense, and Spearmint Breeze. So I've never used any of these colors, so we will see what happens. Actually, I'm already shifting. I think I'm going to go for Valentine Blush instead of ballerina pink because I feel like it's maybe a bit more dusty. I'm not sure, but maybe. Hey, we are not really that hot yet. It's probably a little warm. Here is Duckling, which actually is probably going to be fairly pigmented. Coming in with just a little bit, hoping to let it spread and not be too intense. And again, it's not that I need speckles to stay, but this is actually really, really pretty. Okay, now I might regret this, but my plan, instead of having a yarn mop, is to take my fingers and work this color through. This yellow is, I think, a bit more intense than what I was originally going for, but I like it. It's definitely a less bright yellow than what we had for our highlighter color. Everything is cool enough still that I was able to really move that through. There's pops where, again, it is brighter. This is our Valentine Blush. And I am, again, going really, really slowly to really try to spread it. Okay, so these speckles are a pretty bright pink, but as I'm moving my fingers, trying to move this color through, okay, there are dark and light-ish patches. What kind of color penetration are we getting? I am not sure. Okay, this is a problem. And this is one thing that I was aware of before starting out and embarking on this colorway is that it is hard to get pastel shades when you're dealing with the dry powder. It is really hard. It would have been significantly easier for me to, ooh, Spearmint Breeze, that looks so pretty. It would have been a lot easier for me to dilute the color. Oh boy, this is pigmented. Yeah, it would have been a lot easier for me to dissolve and dilute it. Ooh, that shade though. We don't want the colors to strike too quickly. I'm now rubbing that powder on my hands to bring it in and work that through a bit. There, you can see, we've got variation in here with each of these colors and the hues. Things are brighter than what I was initially going for. But this is what I think I want to do. I think I want, and let's just quickly check, because I think we're on low heat. The water is not yet hot. Not by a long stretch. But I'm going to flip this already. And we will see about adding color to the other side. I'm actually going to turn off the heat, I think. And I'm debating like going bigger with each of these colors or aiming, I'm going to try to aim and stay in the same way. I am making sure to dry my hands as much as I possibly can, to dry my gloves, before I go back in to a color. But, yeah, as I come in and sort of spread out this little bit of powder, and then quickly help it dissolve and then work its way through our yarn, which is going to give us this like tonal, variegated, oh dear, but there's going to be a brightness to it just as it comes in. And it's the brightness mostly on the middle. I feel like maybe need to add a little bit to those edges. I realized as soon as I stopped talking, because I was focusing on the dyeing, that I should turn this into a time lapse and film a voiceover. I turned off the heat and just layered these colors little by little, moving that around and into the yarn with my fingertips. I didn't want the colors to be sort of even and clear, which is one reason why I was going for powders over dissolving them, to help me get more of a true consistent pastel. The downside is that I didn't have the chance to build the colors, and I think that Spearmint Breeze was fairly intense and got more pigmented than I wanted pretty early on. So I'm not sure how I feel about this colorway, but I continue to flip and add more color and flip and add more color and do it slowly. Very much having my hands in there. So I think it's fun, but it's maybe not the most me colorway. Sometimes I back up from something thinking, oof, I love how this turned out. This is amazing. And this one, honestly, I'm feeling a little bit meh about it. I'm going to reserve some judgment. We'll see how the colors look when they're dry. Now, the things I like are the quality of the colors and how like varied it is in each of the different color segments. But I think I wish that the colors were a bit more pastel. So maybe it would have been better for me to put them in a squeeze bottle and sort of layer them a bit that way. I will say I am very thankful that our Anticipation colorway had an element of nostalgia in there, so therefore I don't feel like I failed completely. Not that this is a failure, but it's just, I don't know. We'll see if I'm more excited about it once it is dry. You can see my mask mark from my respirator. But what do you do if you don't love the colorway and it missed the mark? Well, we've got many choices. I am gonna follow this through and see where it ends up dry. Oh, I'm gonna go turn the heat on so we can set the color. I think if I were to repeat this, I would probably start with no acid because that would allow me to spread the colors out more on the surface of the yarn. But we can always over dye this, and I could go really, really big and heavy with, say, a dark colored speckle. It might not then fit our inspiration, but there are things that I could do to this that would turn it into a colorway that excited me a little bit more. But I think that I would like these three colors more sort of like randomly placed around the pan and versus trying to do more like color blocking. I don't know. I think there's things that I would like more with these colors. It just didn't really fit what I was going for, and that's okay. You can dry the yarn, and I could over dye it right now. You can over dye it once it's been dried. There's many things you can do, but I'll leave it as is and we'll see how I feel. But I'm hoping that at least I love the other two colorways, so therefore 2 out of 3 isn't so bad. And I want to be honest with all of you, because sometimes, you know, I love everything and sometimes it didn't quite work, and that's okay. What we can do with that is just learn and continue to grow as artists. You all saw me moving the colors so much. I'm gonna go ahead and heat this for about 20 minutes, just, you know, to make extra sure that things are set, and then I'll turn it off and let it cool in the pan, and we'll come back to wash some yarn. But looking at this yellow right here, and then compare it to our highlighter yellow, that's so cool. I washed the cooled off optimistic and nostalgic colorways in some cool tap water using a little bit of dish soap, and thankfully there was no bleeding. Woohoo! I rinsed them a few more times to remove the soap and then put the yarn through my spin dryer to then hang it up to dry so we could come back and have some conclusions. But oh, that highlighter yellow color is mwah, wonderful. It is the moment of truth. It is rather dark, so I'm not sure if you can tell. Let me try to show you that I have not touched it. I've not touched it. You can kind of see it's exactly the same way. You can actually still see that black stripe-ish section I put on underneath the surface. All right, we are gonna empty. We're gonna take this out and finally see what Anticipation looks like. All right, the light balance is all strange here because this is so dark and this is so bright. This is just some water that we'll use for rinsing. I'm gonna pull this up by the zip ties. All right, let's see. Ooh, 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 see some white. Going to, ooh, we've got some light patches, especially where the skeins were together. I am so excited to look at this dry. Mainly, the main reason why I want to see it dry is because I'm curious how many black versus gray notes we have, and I'm curious with how similar these are to each other. Oof, oof. Let's take a closer look, but you can see the dye bath has cleared. I don't do this type of immersion dyeing as much anymore, and it is so fun. The colors that you get are so random, and we could get more color penetration if I had moved it around more. But we've got these beautiful sections, and there's definitely grays that I think are actually the result of the gray versus the black, but it's hard to know because gray is just a bit lighter black. But anyway, let's go wash this. What could we have done if we wanted more white on this yarn? which I have to say, I am thrilled with how this came out. I think that the amount of light and dark is what I was hoping for, but it's hard to know exactly, and some of the nuance in the depth of these different colors will show up more once it's dry, because everything is so much darker now that it is wet. But if I wanted there to be more white, there are definitely some things I could have done. I could have had less water. I'm just adding, it's the ends of this bottle, some soapy water. If I wanted more white, I could have had less water in the pot to make things more crowded. If the yarn was more crowded in the pot, then the dye wouldn't have been able to strike everywhere as easily. Another thing I could have done is reduce the volume of dye that I was adding. So if I had I added large volumes of dye to help it spread, but if I had gone straight from the squeeze bottles with our 1% stocks, the dye wouldn't have gone as far. And similarly, if I had started off with more acid, the colors would have struck faster to the first yarn that they came in contact with versus spreading. But I am thrilled that we have 300 grams of yarn here that feel like they were dyed in the same pot. Again, we'll see how similar or different they are in a little while, but I am beyond thrilled. So I'm gonna rinse this a few times. I don't see any bleeding. Put this through my spin dryer and then hang it up to dry so we can come back and take a closer look. Optimistic is a fluorescent semi-solid yellow. This brightness evokes the highlighter that was my inspiration, the fresh, pure possibilities of new school supplies, and the beginning of a new learning adventure. Sure, over the year, and as you use the highlighter more and more, the color might be a little less bright, but I'm always optimistic in that there's new things that I can learn and explore. And I really don't think that the camera can do justice to the brightness and happiness in this color. Anticipation with a dash of nostalgia. In here we have our very blue purple, we've got some soft grays, we have some true blacks and more charcoal gray areas that are fairly randomly placed, but all of the skeins have a great mix of all of the colors, and I think it turned out fantastically. Now, the anticipation here was from our technique. The way we had the yarn layered in the pot, we could not know until we took the yarn out if the color went all the way through, how much things had blended together, how much white maybe was left, and the results are fantastic, and I'm so happy. And we have little bits of white, but it's not just around the zip ties. There are other places, and the yarn feels balanced, and I'm so happy. What is the balance that I'm talking about? It is when I go and we look at the yarn, do we feel like there's color all the way through? Or does it potentially feel like maybe as you knit, one side might have a lot more color than the rest? Now, there's definitely variation between these three skeins, but as you flip it around, they all have patches of light and dark to them. And I think that it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure if without knowing the story and the technique, if you feel that same anticipation, but I think that with the randomness, there's also that anticipation of how this colorway will work up. Granted, you can say that about a lot of colorways, but I really pulled that feeling into the dye technique. And I pulled colors that are so similar to the first colors I used, the first time I used acid dyes. And that throwback was just an extra element of fun. And I absolutely love how this turned out. And definitely need to explore this technique with other colors more in the future. If you have any color combination suggestions, let me know down in the comments below. Nostalgia. This one, it's okay. We got close to the colors I had in mind. The yellow is pretty spot on. The pink is pretty close, but in some areas it's a little dark. And then the green is just a bit too bright. I think I picked the wrong technique. I wanted to see if I could play with these, quote, pastel pre-mixed colors in a way that would allow me to create a pastel hue. So I lightly speckled the color onto our yarn in the pot and then moved it around to dissolve it and to distribute the color on the yarn. And depending on the color, this worked well and less well in some areas. Now the reason why I ended up pulling these three colors, like a pale pink and yellow and minty green, was because looking at my own family photos, these were colors I wore a lot as a toddler and young child. And I don't think it's just based on fading of photos. I think legitimately in the early 80s, these were common colors for dressing a little girl. And so that is a big reason why I went there. Now, one thing that is cool is that there are some itty bitty speckles that remain. And these almost make me think of, I don't even know if they're really picking up on camera. They're micro speckles from the pink and the yellow. So some pigment in there was striking pretty quickly, and I actually like these dots. It helps, I don't know, it makes me think about like specks of dust in like the good way for thinking back, a throwback of something old, or the graininess of an old photo. Let me know what you think about this colorway down in the video description. I think that if I were to start over, I would take the same three colors that I used for this colorway, but dissolve them in some water first. And then I would apply the dye as a pastel and slowly build up that color for each of these segments. Now, I think that that wouldn't give us quite as much tonal effect that I do really like about this, but by slowly building up the color, I could have stopped the green before it got a bit too bright, because I think that the areas of the green where it's more pastel, doesn't feel bright there. And so in the brightness, that's where I think it went too far, but it still feels sort of dusty as a minty pastel, and so I could have stopped more at that color. But that's the thing about learning and trying and just going for it. Sometimes you have wins, sometimes not, and these colors are ones that technically I haven't swatched and played with before. So I tried looking at something from the past, but trying something completely new. And I think that there's something in that feeling that is great. But anyway, again, let me know what colors you would have gone for down in the comments below. The last time I did this, I went for some colors that sort of worked together. I remember joy and fatigue, I sort of put a veil over joy, and that combination of colors just worked so well together. Today, I really went for different feelings. I don't think you would use all three of these colorways in one project. You absolutely could. I think it would be slightly unexpected to do so, but I just wanted to push myself a little bit to think about each of the colors slightly differently as we went about this. And even though the third one is not my favorite, I am really happy with all of these together, actually. Again, not to combine in one project, but as the work from this video, I am really, really happy. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want early access to episodes like this, part of the Dyepot PS series, go and learn more about the ChemKnits Patreon. Again, there will be a link down in the video description. I think looking at these colors twisted up as we look at the Nastalgia colorway, I like it a lot more looking at the way that the colors sort of blend together. Sometimes you just need to see it twisted to get a sense of how the colors play together, and maybe this is a case where if I went and reskeined it, I also would like it a lot more than I did looking at it flat. So it's just something to think about when you're looking at a colorway. But I still look forward to hearing what you think. But I definitely wanted to point out that I like the balance of the colors a lot more right now. I also want to give one more thank you to the ChemKnits patrons for selecting these abstract concepts for me to use to dye yarn. It's a lot of fun to come up with ideas, especially when I don't have colors in mind for them, and then see which ones you want to see the most. I really enjoy it. It's a really fun color challenge. And let me know if you want to see me play more with this kind of concept in the future. Make sure that you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel so you never miss a new video. There's always at least 2 new videos every week, and sometimes there's a lot more than that, so you don't want to miss any of it. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content, the biggest way that you can help is by engaging with these videos. Watching, commenting, even just dropping that like on the video tells YouTube that you enjoy the content. And so, yeah, it's the biggest way that anyone can help the channel continue to grow. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.